All right, David Wachsman with an X.
That's right.
How you doing?
Good, Brandon. Thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Happy to have you here. Yeah, before we kind of jump in and start talking about what you guys do and everything, and Walksman, tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm curious about like your background and like how you kind of decided to get into this space and also into like the PR media side of the space too, and then like what that motivation was. So yeah, give me a little bit of background.
So I've been actually in PR for a little. I was in PR for a few years before I started Waxman, but
Mhm.
I was actually at Ogilvy and Mather a couple years before that, which is a large advertising agency, and I saw the power that branding can bring. It was phenomenal, and at the perch I was personally at the time, I saw some really amazing companies dramatically impacted by a rebrand or a refresh, or just a new way of communicating what they do to companies
Mhm.
or sorry, to their clients, whether it was B2C or B2B. Anyway, this in 2014, I discovered Bitcoin because I happened to meet in a bar in New York the CEO of a Bitcoin exchange, coin called CoinSetter, and he convinced me that Bitcoin was the future. So started working with him in 2014. 1 year later, he told me, "You really need to start your own firm." And so I took him at his word and founded Waxman in 2015 with a Bitcoin exchange, a Bitcoin software wallet, hardware wallet, mining pool, Bitcoin ATM network, and a blockchain focused VC. So we had like a menu of options for reporters. And that was the beginning of the company. That was 2015. I was a one man shop, and now we're 75 plus people between New York, Dublin, and Singapore.
How did he convince you that Bitcoin was the next big thing, the thing to get into? Like, was there something about it then that was like super appealing in particular?
So what struck me, and this required several drinks, was that
Sure.
Bitcoin actually had value because it was able to, for the first time, impose digital scarcity. And
Hmm.
that required understanding, or at least the very precept of proof of work, and kind of how quote unquote governance works when it comes to Bitcoin, so that no one can change this. It's very, very hard to change the potential supply of Bitcoin and the issuance rate, which is essentially inflation, predetermined algorithmic inflation. And that was really interesting. That's when I understood that this could be valuable because before that, right, everything you could just copy and paste money. I just remembered
Sure.
online games where like gold drops on the ground and your character runs over. And I remember
Hmm.
all these different games where like duping would occur, where it was really really easy to duplicate money supplies, and that means it's worthless. And so he had to once he convinced me of that, I was like, there's something here. But then the more I learned, I actually was like, wait a minute, the best probably has already come. This was just a few months after the Mount Gox disaster, and Bitcoin price dropped from like 1,200 bucks down to like 400, down to like 200, or maybe even lower. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm really excited about the space, despite the fact that we've probably already seen the all-time high.
Hmm.
Little did I know what was in store.
Yeah. So was that in the first all-time high, like that first run up in like 2013 or
Yeah.
2017? Okay.
So in 2013, Bitcoin went from
Okay.
about $7 to $1,200 by the end of the year,
Yep.
and that was the first time the world, I would say, really paid attention to Bitcoin. Before that, it was the province of like a random article on a tech site that no one paid attention to, or very few people did. There are definitely still Bitcoin OGs that exist, but that was kind of the first class. And then in 2013, people took notice because people were becoming millionaires based on Bitcoin for the first time, and that became
Hmm.
stories. It was like Second Life money was something that people had heard of before, and this was something kind of novel. Um, so I had certainly been reading about Bitcoin in 2013, but I didn't know much about it. I certainly didn't trust it. It required actually meeting a person in the space who knew what they were talking about, someone like that appealed to me, someone who was well educated, who was an entrepreneur, he had worked in private equity previously, who had raised venture
Hmm.
money, and I was like, okay, well, this guy who's sharp, he knows what he's doing. He says Bitcoin's real. That gave me the basically it convinced me that I should spend the time to learn about it. And then understanding digital scarcity, reading the Bitcoin white paper, I was like, well, shit. I guess this guy Satoshi's onto something.
Yeah, the interesting about Bitcoin, I think most people overlook a little bit, is that they focus so much on, Bitcoin being a potential store of value. Like, does it have value? Does it have digital value? Like, is it money? Is it the new gold? But I think one of the interesting things that people kind of gloss over is the fact that it's opened up this whole idea that anything digital, period, can have real actual tangible value.
Right.
And that's the new thing. Bitcoin's just, I think, the best damn use case of that. And I think it's been pretty evident over the last decade, given the fact that it's the best performing asset of the last decade, that it's established, this new digital age we're moving into, which is, really important to have and be able to say that something digital can be of value. Because we're all moving into like virtual reality, augmented reality, and robotics and AI, and everything's just going to be completely digital in the future. So it's important to, I guess, establish that. I'm sure you probably agree.
No, I 100% agree. I think blockchain, for some reason, is able to finally put a value on things that we knew had value, but you couldn't put your finger on exactly how much. It's like
Hmm.
data. People have been trying to figure out how to go and tokenize data for quite some time. It seems like low hanging fruit. And not everything has been successful so far, but we're getting really, really, really close. And I think some of the current approaches are going to work. It just requires a certain critical mass. But that's super interesting. I mean, if data is going to be the new oil, it needs to have value, real value. Like, so when you have an oil derrick in a field in Texas, right? Like that can go and make someone, money, and then that can turn into a business that can turn into a multinational corporation and supply chains and all the side business that come with that. Data is going to be that too. Right now, we've only seen the
Hmm.
very large corporations like Facebook and Google making money on that. But once we can see mom and pop shops and other companies in the mix somehow, that by itself is going to be truly revolutionary.
You think like Facebook and Google, some of the big tech companies were really the first pioneers into figuring out that, things that are digital, like your information, stuff like that, details about you as a person or what you do, and how they monetize that. Do you think that they're probably the first ones to realize that uh, something digital can have real tangible value? Because it feels like a lot of that stuff is obviously shifting into blockchain because it's more decentralized and it solves a lot of the big tech problems. But it feels like they kind of were there first and like really identified that something digital can have value. It's just putting it all together, I guess, and giving it a good use.
Because before, I think you're right. Those probably are the first class of companies to really make money on digital, on something purely
Hmm.
digital, as opposed to digitizing something that's purely tangible. Like Amazon and eBay got famous selling hard goods on the internet. And of course,
Hmm.
now eBay is one of their top businesses is AWS, which is closing in on making money on pure digital. I mean, there's a high capex expenditure for those data farms and those clouds, but you see where we're going here. And more the world is going that way. Music was another thing that we saw, revolutionized the world as it's gone digital. And now that's essentially a purely digital asset that exists. Um, Same thing
Hmm.
is proving true with art right now. And we're seeing that take shape with NFTs, where those are suddenly accruing tremendous value, whether it's overheated or not. I mean, I would argue that right now it seems a little bit so. Just
Hmm.
there's a small amount of NFTs out there that are high quality, but
Right.
it's likely to change in the future.
Yeah, NFTs are booming right now. It's kind of funny because they were popular, a few years back as well. CryptoKitties especially really kind of kicked it off on Ethereum, like, oh, you can do all this digital collectible type shit, and it was really interesting. But it's like pen to paper becoming more valuable. But in some ways, it's like I feel like the idea of NFTs right now, it's still a little broken. Like it's not all put together. Like you're seeing $1 million purchases for a crypto punk. Like what are you going to do with a crypto punk? I mean, I have nothing against crypto punks as I know them, they're awesome, but like where's the tangible value in owning a CryptoPunk? I mean, from an art perspective, maybe I can see that, but I feel like it's still early because I feel like there are a lot of things you can use NFTs for, and real world use cases that will have far more value. So it feels like we're kind of just scratching the surface using collectibles and gaming and stuff like that, which is great. Um, but it's also a good way to look at it and to know that it's still very, very early, and that it's not really rounded out yet, I guess, in my opinion.
No, I think you're totally right. NFTs, for instance, for insurance claims, are
Hmm.
really, really an interesting use case that has an enormous amount of value. People are finding ways to tokenize everything. You're hearing a lot of
Right.
that phrase nowadays, and NFTs are a great way to do it, and something that's not a pure commodity.
Do you have a favorite NFT?
Well, I do, just because I've been in the space for a little while. There's a guy who makes crypto kaijus, which I think are super super fun. Um,
I've seen them.
yeah, and
Very cool.
so I'm a huge fan of the work that they've been doing for quite some time. And the team at Materium has also built some really cool NFT collectibles as well, and actually worked with William Shatner on one, which I thought was pretty exciting. We actually worked on the Decentraland project when it launched, and I thought that was a really cool
Mhm.
use case again of NFTs with land rights, etc. So um, big fan, but I think that to your point, we are just scratching the surface.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion on virtual land bringing up like Decentraland? 'Cause there's a few different projects in the space, like Crypto Voxels. I know Ben Nolan really well. I've kind of been in that community for a while. Decentraland's pretty cool. Somnium Space, and there's some others. Um, but it feels like that's like a really another untapped area for NFTs, but potentially really important in the future. If virtual reality becomes like a big thing, where are people going to go? Where are people going to invest their time? Are they going to have a virtual house or a virtual business? Are they going to do advertising? Yeah, kind of curious what you think about that, because it's really kind of the wild west still, just like everything else in this space.
I mean, this whole metaverse concept is just, it's kind of mind blowing. And that's probably
Yeah.
why it's been the stuff of so many movies, Ready Player One, et cetera, to some extent, The Matrix. And yeah, I don't know where it's going to go at all. What I am seeing are really, really smart entrepreneurs. And I'm very fortunate to be in this position where I get to talk to
Mhm.
young startups and more established companies, growth stage businesses too. And we're seeing really, really smart entrepreneurs building companies where, let's say, NFTs are a really important part of the tech stack of what they're doing. There's experimentation happening. Some of these companies are just going to kill it. Others, might not work out in the end. But we're in a really interesting time where someone can just have a really good idea, team up with someone else who's really good technically and has just enough chops and just enough experience, and those guys can, or that team, I should say, can build something great, can build a multi-million-dollar business, very quickly. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you probably talk to them as much as I do at Waxman. Is blockchain like a huge focus for you guys because it's such a big, fast-growing niche, or do you guys also have other sectors or industries that you work with in terms of companies?
So we were born in Bitcoin. This is the place that Waxman was formed to be a
Hmm.
Bitcoin focused firm. And the vast majority of our business, in some way, shape, or form, intersects with the space. But as we've grown, our clients have become more and more mature. And we do have clients in true financial services, in quote unquote traditional fintech. We have clients that are in, let's call it e commerce or exponential technologies that aren't necessarily blockchain, but the majority of our clientele are within this sector. For what we do for them is traditional comms, strategy consulting, market entry. We help clients, for instance, that may be in the US today but want to enter Asia. Since Waxman has had an office in Singapore, for instance, for it'll be 3 years this year, with quite a large team, we can help companies gain a foothold, for instance, in a totally new sector, help them establish themselves, help them hire people, and help them acquire customers and users. So it's the type of thing that's a growing business for us.
Gotcha. It sounds like it's growing a lot. Actually, here's a good question: Is it you guys mostly international? Do you take on a lot of companies from different regions, or you focus on a specific area? Like, are you regional or?
So Waxman has offices in New York, Dublin, and
Mhm.
Singapore. And the reason that they're in those specific cities is that we have the opportunity to work with companies in the time zones or similar time zones to where those those offices are. So, for instance, our U.S. office is very often working with companies in Latin America. For instance, we work with Bitso, which is the largest exchange in Mexico, in Argentina, as an example. We also work with a number of Canadian companies, and of course, lots of companies on the West Coast, Silicon Valley, et cetera. Our offices in Europe work with companies in Israel or Dubai, and of course, pan Europe, and actually some companies that have verged into Africa. And our team in Singapore works with companies from Australia, through East Asia and South Asia as well.
Have you guys seen like an uptick in demand for like PR in the crypto space? Because I definitely have. Like I'm getting like so many inquiries, and I know I have other friends in the podcasting space as well, or in crypto, and they're getting tons of inquiries. And I feel like a lot of people are trying to jump on the trend right now where everyone's excited about Bitcoin and blockchain because it's all going up in the market and there's a lot of development. And it's like I just feel like for them maybe it's a really good PR opportunity. So I'm kind of curious if you guys have seen like a spike since the beginning of the year.
What I've found is there tends to be too high a correlation between Bitcoin price and overall market interest. And when I say overall market
Yeah.
interest, I mean that things that should have no reason to be related to Bitcoin price, like security token systems, should have absolutely nothing to do with Bitcoin price. They're barely related.
Hmm.
Um, Private blockchain implementations, same thing. And yet, what we're seeing is total growth in the sector. And I would say there's like only a little bit of lag behind how the market's doing. Um, One thing that I'm hoping to see during this particular market cycle is an increased separation between market price and let's call it interest in the sector. And when I say interest in the sector, I mean not only new capital formation, but businesses forming, go to market strategies being implemented, products actually hitting, people's iPhones and Android phones and computers, et cetera. I'm hoping that we start seeing a separation between those things. And I'd say that would be a really good sign of a truly maturing market.
Yeah, that would be a good sign. It kind of feels like a lot of the PR has like picked up in the last couple months because like the last couple years um we've had this crypto winter. It's been kind of slow. Like how did you guys get through that? Like did you guys get a lot of demand and business through that long like 2 year almost crypto winter or like I'm kind of curious because there was like a lot of news and a lot of development that was going on during that time, but it wasn't necessarily as popular. Like it didn't seem like news outlets were desiring that kind of information to show to their audience. So I wasn't quite sure where the demand was, but like, I don't know, from your perspective, what were you seeing?
Well, there's two sides to this. So, from in Waxman's, let's call it traditional PR business, which we
Uh-huh.
do with a lot of our clients. For us, one of the most important things that we have is relationships with reporters, and we do our very best to do temperature checks on how do media feel about blockchain, and we do this all the time. We've been doing this for years because let's not forget, Waxman was born in a bear market, and actually at the end of towards the end of a 2 year
Mhm.
bear market in Bitcoin. I mean, I started in the space at the very beginning of a 2 year bear market in Bitcoin, and then
Mhm.
there's been a few cycles since.
Sure.
Um, Reporters' interest seems to lag slightly behind Bitcoin price. And when I say that, there are trade publications, and God bless them. That's where you have a lot of reporters who are real experts in the space. But the top tier, you know who they are. I'm not going to say them out loud. Mainstream
Sure.
publications, they simply add more reporters to cover the sector when the market is hot, and they reduce the number of reporters who cover the sector. They call that the beat. It's a news beat. They actually reduce the supply of those when the market is cold. And so you'll see a lot of Bitcoin activity on traditional news shows, and I'm talking about on television or on
Mhm.
business networks. That's typically during warm cycles. When it's cold, you don't see a whole lot of that. So we've certainly seen the media respond in that fairly logical way. On the business side, Waxman itself, we've been fortunately in the sector for quite some time, and I'm not saying it was easy. It's hard to build a business in blockchain. Period. A business
Mhm.
that depends on cash flows that pays a substantial amount of people very good wages and good benefits. But we survived, and you learn lessons as an entrepreneur in building a business in the sector, and you try to go and build on the lessons that you've learned for next time. Very fortunately, to your point, where the market's good right now, there's a lot of interest in the space, and we're definitely growing and hiring in every office.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys are doing well. It's very true though, 'cause blockchain's a very tough space to build a business in. And I've had the fortune to meet lots of different people and CEOs and founders and owners and whatnot in the space, and they always have issues finding enough developers or finding enough people that have enough interest to stay long term, especially like in a bear market. Like the last couple of years are pretty tough for a lot of startups. Um, and I think it's very an underrated thing. It's very similar to like the dot com bubble in a lot of ways. It's like if you can make it through, some of that hype, that initial interest and then that like that downtrend. And then once it starts becoming more relevant, like it kind of feels now. And then your business is going to do pretty well because you're in a very new industry that's revolutionary, really popular, is going to have a lot of demand. I see a lot of similarities there because it was very, it's a very hard crypto winter, I guess, to put it.
I mean, it certainly was. We saw a drop off from $850 billion market cap in January or so, late December 2017, January 2018, to $100 billion in December. I remember when like Ether hit its all time low, it was like around $84 per Ether token, something like that, in
Hmm.
around December 15. And I was at a conference in San Francisco, and all these funds, a lot of them from Asia, were just like, "What do we do?" They had made a lot of investments. They had LPs who had trusted them. And to be honest, actually, they made a lot of really good bets, as it turns out. It's just that the market was one thing after another. It was one punch after the next. And to your point, it was very hard to survive. But those that did, they're doing really, really well now.
Hmm.
My hope is that they continue to be vigilant and smart entrepreneurs, and protect their six. And if they do, I think they're going to have very, very long and successful careers and businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the pandemic? Because last year was pretty crazy. Like, were you guys able to navigate that okay? Were you guys able to like work remotely, or did you have things put in place so that uh, things didn't fall off the table? It's kind of like a 50-50 thing. I hear some people, their businesses just had a really rough time and they barely got by and they had to lay off people. And then the other half, they're like, oh, no, we're fine because we're in blockchain. We just do everything remotely. And we actually got more done because we were developing the whole time. So I feel like there's an interesting balance there. But yeah, kind of curious, how did you guys end up getting through that?
Well, at first it was really, really hard for two reasons. Nobody wanted to sign a contract, and you can't blame them at the beginning of the pandemic because no one knew if the world was effectively ending. And so we
Sure.
saw a few, very rough months, in particular at the beginning of the pandemic, and it had some deleterious effects on morale. There's no question. Moreover, I've always been, well, since starting this company, I've been a big believer in decentralized technologies. But I was a big believer before in centralized workplaces. I figured you need to be in the same place to get things done. You need to have a whiteboard. You need to actually have people in the same exact room, especially when you're onboarding new staff members. So this way they can be trained by osmosis in a most efficacious manner. And the pandemic completely prevented that.
Hmm.
And so, although I loved the idea of everyone going into an office, and we have had very substantial office spaces in all of our geographies, suddenly that was kind of taken away, and we had to kind of look at ourselves. The good thing is, to your point, a lot of our clients were already working in a decentralized manner. And so some of the first phone calls I was making last March and April were to my clients, and I was saying, "How did you do it? How is it that you were working? How your finance team was working remotely? That your dev shops were or DevOps were working remotely? That your customer support were working remotely? How have you been doing this whole time?" And we did our best to kind of learn lessons from them, and then we implemented them across the agency. And it turned out to be very, very, very successful. I think it's the one thing that I'd say I'm still trying to figure out how to do is how to maintain, let's call it culture, in a
Hmm.
decentralized way. That's something that I don't think we've certainly perfected yet, but a lot of stuff we have, a lot of the let's call it the primary and fundamental elements of a picks and shovels business, that we've kind of figured out. If any of your the watchers, or sorry, the audience members here today have ideas on how to go and maintain a decentralized culture, I'm super interested.
Yeah, what do you mean by decentralized culture? I'm sure they'll be interested as well, but I'm also curious because I don't know if I've heard that term before. But like, what do you mean exactly?
So company culture is a lot more than just like we believe in integrity and we believe in loyalty and we believe in X, Y, and Z. Company culture
Sure.
sometimes is the friendships and connectivity that are shared between people, and it's kind of like creates this organic type of set of traditions. How do you maintain, cultivate, improve culture in a decentralized way
Hmm.
when people are literally living in different time zones, aggregating on Zoom meetings, if that. Sometimes it's calls. They have their own lives. They've got appointments. They're trying to get vaccines. People are falling ill. They've got family members that they might have to attend to, and they're not convening in an office. How do you maintain that type of, uh, I don't know, tied together culture in this era? I mean, maybe it's something you've had to spend time thinking about, but I spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah, I think I've heard some other people, comments on that as well. It is difficult when, especially like when we went through a pandemic and everything's done remotely, everything's done over Zoom. It's like you don't have that same connection, with the people you work with in your workplace, and sometimes that can affect productivity. Sometimes that just can affect it can affect integrity or just a number of things. But in my opinion, the rudimentary solution is virtual reality, even though it's not really fully here yet. But if we had it during the pandemic and it was a bit further along, maybe where it's going to be at in the next 4 or 5 years, I think that would help solve the problem. 'Cause I've had some incredible conversations VR, and I've
Really?
oh yeah, some incredible ones, and that's just using Oculus and the stupid Facebook chat rooms or alt space or whatever it's called, and they're really kind of shitty, but you can have like real. It feels like you're having an in-person conversation. You can see the hand gestures. You can run around with each other and throw a ball and talk about blockchain, and I don't know. It feels kind of real, and you can set up like meeting rooms and sit down with clients or with colleagues in your company, or go to a movie or see a basketball game with your friends. I personally think that that's the future of where we're going digitally, because it'll just streamline our lives a lot more. Like there'll be less that we have to worry about getting done. Like I know I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but like think of the average housewife, or the average mom, the soccer mom, like that kind of stereotypical person. Like they have so much they got to get done in one day, right? But they can't go do it all necessarily, or they're going to be like incredibly stressed out, or they're just going to be overwhelmed. And over time, you get burnt out. Everyone kind of goes through that. Like imagine if you get all that done in VR, in an hour versus spending 5, 6, 7 hours out running errands all day long. Go to a virtual grocery store, spend 10 minutes there, pick everything you want, Amazon delivers it. Go to a virtual game with your friends or a virtual movie, leave whenever you need to, and be at home, and spend more time with your kids or with your
It sounds
spouse or
it sounds like an improved, to some extent, an improved version of what we have today.
Mhm.
Delivery services have certainly taken off. We've seen some of these, let's call it virtualized businesses, if not virtual businesses, that have done really, really well. And
Exactly.
when this pandemic ends, and knock on wood, it's going to end sooner than later. I do wonder how much traditional business is going to shift. But going back to kind of our conversation, I think that the crypto businesses, or crypto, is here to stay, and I say that because the pandemic has kind of been a perfect catalyst for reintroducing this to the mainstream. The market notwithstanding, for the first time, you probably don't want to touch cash, physical cash.
Right.
You want to physically hand it over to somebody else. Even a credit card feels insufficiently digital. And so we've seen the rise, for instance, in Apple Pay and total virtual payments. We've seen the rise in delivery services and anything that's like delivery. And if anything could put the death knell on certain industry, like streaming, for instance, put the death
Hmm.
knell on movies and even traditional TV, because people needed, to your point, something kind of on demand and brought to you. Maybe kind of encapsulating all of this in a virtual world will add literally new dimensions and figuratively new dimensions to the whole experience. So
Hmm.
it's stickier, but I think we're already starting to see part of that. And I think that, as I mentioned earlier, there's some really smart entrepreneurs in the space now who are probably going to figure out how to go and use crypto rails to improve on that virtual business experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's in a nutshell, it's just about, streamlining society. How can you make things faster, more efficient, um, cost less, more productive? So yeah, VR is one of those tools. Crypto is going to be a huge tool for that, especially in terms of like, money and payment systems and remittance and things like that, and tokenization, digital assets. There's a lot that it can touch in the real world, which is again why the space is so exciting.
Absolutely, 100%.
And you obviously you have your finger on the pulse of the industry quite a bit, because you're talking to these companies a lot and these new startups, and so you got probably a good feel for a little bit what's going on. Do you feel like this, current bull run we're in with the crypto markets and all this hype that's kind of driving this bull run and all the interest, the company money, blah 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 blah. Do you think that this bull run is coming to ends pretty soon, or do you think that there's a bit more to this spring, or what's your opinion on, I guess, the current state of the market?
I've got to tell you, it has grown faster than I could have imagined. I certainly would not have predicted $50,000 Bitcoin this soon. It's incredible to me. I'm still blown away by it.
Hmm.
It does feel like the market's overheated, but I could be completely wrong, and maybe it's going to 3x. I have literally no idea. I don't think anybody does. And although you hear a lot of fund managers saying, "Well, we think it's going to 2x by this time." We had a client who has pretty good models for why there should be $100,000 Bitcoin by Q3
Hmm.
this year. And again, maybe that's the case. What I'll say is what I'm really excited about is what's being built as a consequence of the hot market. There's really smart people who aren't taking a career risk by being in the blockchain space and then spending the months and years it takes to actually build sustainable businesses. That's happening now. I don't think that would have happened if we were back in the total bear market, if Bitcoin went under sub $1,000. I do wonder if people would be willing to go and invest their time into building on the technologies that have been built so far. Probably wouldn't happen, and that to me is the most exciting part.
Yeah, in terms of, the trends and things coming out of this bull run, this kind of igniting all this, innovation, these ideas, is there anything in particular that like strikes you or that you find really interesting or exciting, whether it's in the NFT space or just in cryptocurrency, like with Bitcoin, or in like monetary policy, or in DeFi? I mean, there's so many things popping up right now. Is there anything in particular that makes you excited?
Yeah, I'm really excited about a few things. First, I definitely think we're going to see, you mentioned remittances earlier, the true introduction of blockchain rails as a means of vastly improving remittance. That is 100% happening. It's super exciting. Um, I'm I know that a lot of people say that you shouldn't, but I am excited about CBDCs because it means more people are going to have digital wallets. And let's just start there. That is a win for everybody in the
Mhm.
sector if people have digital wallets and use them and pay attention to them. I'm very excited about. There actually is, in part because regulators across the world they know their stuff. I think there's going to be a real progression on securities, improvement of how securities are traded and settled, et cetera. And we've seen with the GameStop saga that is a desperate need for an improvement of stock markets. We've seen that. We've seen a perfect use case and example for this. And there's a reason why we've had companies endeavoring in that sector since 2015, right? Overstock, T0 being the first. And now we're seeing companies across the world, really smart businesses and stock exchanges themselves who are trying to figure out how to use blockchain to upend clearance and settlement of equities, fixed income, et cetera. So there's a lot of places I'm excited about. Creator coins, I think, are really cool. So we talked about NFTs before, but uh, I see a huge space for artists and musicians, esports stars, et cetera, to kind of find a way to use tokens as a way to further engage with fans. It's really exciting. It provides something with, if you go to a concert and you get a guitar pick from the guitarist, like that's your collectible. Maybe you buy a T-shirt, and like those things, God willing, won't go away. But having something of your own, a new type of way to engage with the people that you love en masse, is really cool, and that's something I think is happening right now. And then, last but not least, I do think that we're going to see social networks using crypto as a means to better reward people. Steemit was the
Mhm.
first company to do it in this space, and I think that was a great idea. I think we're going to see some versions of that in the future that are going to take off because it has to be inevitable. You should get paid something for having an opinion, for inciting a conversation, for drawing eyeballs. You should get compensated for that, and people are figuring that out now.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I mean, it'd be beneficial for both sides, actually. What's the project? BAT, or Basic Attention Token. They did a pretty good job with it too, and they're still around. And they have the
Brave now has more than 25 million unique visitors, or sorry, application users. They're doing really well. And yeah, that token is kind of what
Mhm.
powers a lot of that experience.
Yeah, and they have the Brave browser too. I actually really like that browser. I know it's kind of a clone of Chrome, but it works really well. It's good privacy wise and for work and everything. What was I going to say? Oh, I yeah, I agree with your point, and I think it's good for both sides, not just for the user, but also for companies because it incentivizes them to do it in the right way. And if you think about it, they're getting more accurate information. Like if like Facebook or Google or whatever, they're like being sneaky about trying to figure out what your favorite beer is. They might be able to guess it, but they might not be 100% accurate versus having an incentive for the user to, to monetize that information and go, oh, okay, well, if I tell you what kind of beer I like, I'll get $1 for that in Bitcoin or a token or something like that, right? And then the company gets accurate information. The user gets paid for their info, and it's not stolen. You don't have issues. Advertiser is going to have better analytics in terms of their reach because they're actually going to show you ads you want to see. Um, I think that's going to be a really important area for social media.
Definitely. No, I think we've got a very exciting 2021 ahead. We're almost a quarter way through, but there's the future is very bright right now.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up and everything, because I got to go in a few. Where can people find Waxman online? Just is it just the website? Do you guys have social media? Do you have a blog? Where should people go?
Yeah, just go waxman.com. Wachsman is .com is a good place to go. And then, yeah, you can see us on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And we definitely want to hear from you. If you're interested in the sector, if you've got great ideas, if you've got ideas on culture, please let me know. And if you're looking for a position in the space that doesn't require you to be a developer, please hit us up as well.
Awesome. Well, David, thanks for taking the time to come on the podcast. Fun conversation. Really enjoyed it. And learned a lot about Waxman and a lot about you too. Just a great talk overall. A lot about blockchain and crypto, and I think my audience will definitely enjoy it.
Thanks, Brandon. Really appreciate it.
All right, man. See you soon.